In a quiet corner of the bustling world, there lived a man named Marshall. To the outside observer, Marshall's life was full. He had a good job, a comfortable home, and a circle of close friends. But inside, Marshall felt a constant undercurrent of unease, as if the world around him was too vast and overwhelming. He often found himself lost in a sea of responsibilities, anxieties, and expectations, feeling like he was adrift without an anchor. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Marshall called his mother. She had always been his rock, offering comfort and wisdom in his darkest moments. As he poured out his heart to her, he expressed how everything in his life seemed too big to handle. "The world's too big, Mom," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his troubles. There was a pause on the other end of the line before his mother responded, her voice calm and reassuring. "Then make it small." Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Marshall wasn't quite sure what she meant, but he felt a glimmer of hope spark within him. He asked her to explain, and she did so by sharing a memory from his childhood. "Do you remember," she began, "when you were little and used to get overwhelmed by the dark? You would tell me how the shadows scared you, how they seemed to grow bigger and more frightening the longer you stared at them." Marshall nodded, recalling those nights when he would hide under his blanket, too afraid to move. "I would tell you to focus on my voice," his mother continued. "Pretend it's an island out in the ocean. Can you see it?" "I see it," Marshall would reply, his young mind picturing the safe haven his mother's voice represented. "Then swim towards it, honey." As a child, this simple exercise had always brought him comfort, shrinking the shadows that had loomed so large in his mind. His mother's voice was his lifeline, guiding him back to a place of safety and peace. Marshall's mother reminded him that the world was much like those shadows. When we focus too much on the vastness and uncertainty of life, it can feel overwhelming. But if we make the world small, if we focus on the things that truly matter, our loved ones, our passions, the simple joys in life, we can find peace amidst the chaos. Inspired by his mother's words, Marshall decided to make a change. He began to declutter his life, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. He started with his home, clearing out items that no longer brought him joy or served a purpose. With each box of discarded belongings, he felt a little lighter, a little freer. But the real challenge lay in decluttering his mind. Marshall realized that he had been carrying the weight of too many worries and fears, most of which were beyond his control. He began to practice mindfulness, focusing on the present moment, rather than letting his thoughts spiral into what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. He found solace in small, daily rituals, brewing a cup of tea in the morning, taking a walk in the park, spending quiet moments in his garden. These simple activities became his anchors, grounding him in the present and helping him to appreciate the beauty of the world around him. At work, Marshall learned to set boundaries. He no longer allowed himself to be consumed by the endless demands of his job. Instead, he prioritized his well-being, taking breaks when needed and leaving work at the office at the end of the day. He found that by making his world small, by focusing on the tasks at hand rather than the overwhelming big picture, he was more productive and less stressed. As he made these changes, Marshall noticed a shift in his mindset. He began to see the world not as a vast, intimidating place, but as a series of small, manageable moments. He found joy in the simple things, in the laughter of friends, in the warmth of the sun on his face, in the quiet moments of solitude. But Marshall's journey was not without its challenges. There were still days when the weight of the world pressed down on him, when the anxieties he thought he had left behind resurfaced. On those days, he would close his eyes and remember his mother's words. He would picture the island in his mind, the place of peace and calm that he could always return to, no matter how stormy the seas of life became. One evening, after a particularly tough day at work, Marshall felt the familiar sense of overwhelm creeping in. He sat down on his bed, closed his eyes, and tried to picture the island. But this time, something was different. The island felt farther away, harder to reach. The waves around it were choppy, and the sky was overcast. Marshall felt a pang of panic as he realized that he couldn't reach the island, that the peace he sought was slipping away from him. The more he tried to calm himself, the more the storm raged on. Just as he was about to give up, he heard a voice in his mind. It was his mother's voice, soft and reassuring. "Swim towards it, honey," the voice said. "Don't let the storm stop you. You can reach it. Just keep swimming." Marshall took a deep breath and focused on the sound of his mother's voice. He imagined himself swimming through the choppy waters, pushing against the waves as he made his way towards the island. It was hard, and there were moments when he wanted to give up, but he kept going. He kept swimming, kept focusing on the island, until finally he felt the sand beneath his feet. He had made it. He had reached the island. Marshall took a deep breath, feeling the calm of the island wash over him. The stormy seas began to recede, and the sky cleared. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm, golden light over the island. As he stood on the shore, Marshall realized that the island was not just a place in his mind. It was a part of him, a place of peace and calm that he could always return to, no matter how stormy the seas of life became. In that moment, he understood what his mother had been trying to tell him all along. The world wasn't too big. It was only as big as he let it be. And no matter how overwhelming it seemed, he had the power to make it small, to focus on the things that mattered most and find his way back to his island of peace. With this newfound understanding, Marshall began to live his life with a greater sense of purpose and intention. He continued to make his world small, focusing on the present moment and the things that brought him joy and fulfillment. He embraced mindfulness, taking time each day to center himself and appreciate the simple beauty of life. As he practiced this way of living, Marshall found that his anxiety began to fade. He no longer felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the world. Instead, he saw it as a collection of small moments, each one an opportunity to find peace and happiness. He realized that happiness wasn't something that could be found outside of himself, but something that came from within, from a deep sense of presence and contentment. Marshall's journey wasn't just about finding peace for himself. He began to share his story with others, talking to his friends and family about the changes he had made in his life and the importance of making the world small. He encouraged them to focus on the things that mattered most, to practice mindfulness, and to find their own islands of peace. He found that many of the people in his life were also struggling with feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, and they were grateful for his insights. Marshall realized that by sharing his journey, he was helping others to find their own paths to peace and happiness. He saw how his mother's simple advice had touched so many lives, how her words had helped people find their way back to themselves. As he continued to share his journey, Marshall noticed a ripple effect. The people he had spoken to started to make changes in their own lives, focusing on the small things and practicing mindfulness. He saw how his actions were creating a positive impact on those around him, helping them to find peace and happiness in a world that often felt too big and too demanding. Through his journey, Marshall learned that life is not about achieving perfection or meeting all the expectations placed upon us. It's about finding joy in the present moment, about making the world small and focusing on the things that matter most. He realized that happiness is not something that can be achieved through external success, but something that comes from within, from a deep sense of presence and mindfulness. As he looked back on his journey, Marshall felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons he had learned and the people who had supported him along the way. He knew that life would always have its challenges, but he also knew that he had the power to navigate those challenges with grace and presence. He had found his island of peace, his place of calm amidst the chaos of life. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would always have the power to make his world small, to focus on the things that mattered most, and to find happiness in the present moment. Marshall sat on the porch of his small cottage, overlooking the tranquil garden he had cultivated over the years. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light over the landscape, and he felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. As he sipped on a cup of tea, he thought back to the journey he had been on, to the lessons he had learned about making the world small and finding happiness in the present moment. He realized that the world hadn't changed. It was still full of challenges and demands, but his perspective had shifted, and that had made all the difference. He had learned to focus on the small things, on the moments of joy and connection that made life meaningful. He had learned to embrace mindfulness and presence, to let go of the need to control everything, and to find peace in the here and now. And as he looked out at the garden, at the flowers blooming in vibrant colors, at the birds chirping in the trees, he realized that he had found what he had been searching for all along, a sense of happiness that came from within, a deep sense of peace and contentment that came from making the world small. Marshall knew that life would always have its ups and downs, its moments of joy and its moments of challenge, but he also knew that he had the power to navigate those moments with grace and presence, to find happiness in the small things, and to make the world a better place, one small moment at a time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marshall smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey he had been on. He knew that he had found his island of peace, his place of calm amidst the chaos of life. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would always have the power to make his world small, to focus on the things that mattered most, and to find happiness in the present moment. And with that thought, Marshall took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and let the peace of the present moment wash over him, knowing that he had found his way home.